Hello and welcome to the first part of the basic tutorials for FL Studio music production. In this part I will be teaching you the very basics of FL Studio in a different approach than what I've seen around the internet. I will be showing you the very basic functionality of FL Studio, how to navigate around FL Studio, the different views, as well as basic music creation. To begin, I will show you how to navigate around the software. You can see here that there are a bunch of boxes. You do not need to worry about the last three so much as you need to worry about the first five. These are your main navigational tools for FL Studio. You need to know what each of these do. The first shows you the playlist view, which is this view right here. The second shows you the channel rack or the step sequencer view, which is this here. The third one shows you the piano roll, opening up a keyboard-like layout where you can program your music. The next shows you your browser. This is this on the side. This is where you will be finding all of your drum samples, your effects, all of that stuff that you will be using to make your song unique. By default, there is an FL Studio sample pack set filled with drums and other such sounds under the FL Studio packs region. You can go under it and you will find some drums categorized very conveniently, all there ready for you to use in your songs. To browse through them, you can click on them and mouse down with the arrow keys. This makes sample creation and sample browsing very quick and efficient. And last, you have the mixer view, which is the fifth button. This opens up your mixer where you will be doing all of your mixing to get your track to sound good. Let us take a more hands-on approach than just showing you what everything does. Let us actually create a simple beat. First way to do this is to open up the channel rack. As you can see, by default you have 4 channels loaded. They are labeled kick, clap, hat, and snare. These channels are default loaded into the channel rack every single time you open up FL Studio. They're samplers with default FL, kick, clap, hat, and snare samples. If you click on the box next to the samples or the channel, you'll see that it highlights. This means that you can now play what is in the channel. In this case, we have a snare. You can play these using your computer keyboard, or if you have a MIDI keyboard, feel free to use that as well. Same goes for the hi-hat, the clap, as well as the kick. Let us go over basic controls in the channel rack. If you go to the left, you'll see these controls. These knobs I do not recommend that you use because they are very limiting and they can generate bad habits, but I will still tell you what they do just for the sake of consistency. The first knob on the left is channel panning. If you move it to the left, the channel will pan to the left. If you move it to the right, the channel will pan to the right. As you can hear, this is what panning does. The next is simply a volume fader. It sounds like this. Though again, I do not recommend that you use them because they are not very efficient and they can generate very bad habits. So I recommend that you stay away from them for the most part. The box with the numbers in them is directly corresponding to empty mixer tracks. We'll be talking more about that later on in this tutorial part. For starters, let us get a basic drum beat going. To do that, we can use the step sequencer on the right. I will first set the tempo to 128 BPM due to the fact that this is the tempo that most house music is in. To set the tempo, you can go to this box and you can click on it and drag up and down to select your BPM. As previously mentioned, I will keep it at 128. Now you can use the step sequencer to create drum loops very simply. Clicking on the boxes highlights them and turns them on. What you'll notice if you press space or play is that now you have a kick going. This can be used very efficiently to create drum samples and drum beats very quickly. The same principle can be used to add something in, like a clap for example. If you want, you can add additional snares and you have a basic drum beat. If you have made a mistake and you want to undo, you can simply right click on the note to take it away from the channel rack. For now, this is the beat that I'll be using. I will drag this out of the way and simply take my paintbrush tool or my pencil tool in this menu here and click down. This will place it into the playlist. As of now, these are together. There is a kick and a clap playing at the same time in this one pattern. If we want to separate them, we simply go to the pattern menu, click down, and go to split by channel to get two separate patterns. FL Studio is pattern based. Here you create your patterns, you select the instrument that you want to use from your channel rack, and you can add additional instruments down here, and then using the piano roll view you can program your instruments. We will be adding some chords. I will first find a piano, and in this case I will use FL Keys. And as you can hear, we have a piano loaded. I will not be messing around with these settings too much because that is not the purpose of this video. To create a piano chord set, we can go up here to the pattern view window. We can click on the plus and it will make a new pattern for us. We can decide what to name it, and I will call it piano. If we want, we can even color this, and I will choose the color that I use for my synth, which is blue. After pressing enter, it will have created a new pattern. We can go to the tools up here, we can select the draw tool, and we can paint it in. Let us go in more in depth about what these tools actually do. First, we will go to the piano roll. These tools are usable in the playlist and in the piano roll in order to easily make edits to your MIDI or audio files. As you can see, the draw tool enables you to draw notes. The paintbrush tool enables you to draw notes very quickly by holding down the mouse button and dragging out. This is very useful for things such as hi-hats. If you've made a mistake, you can go to the delete tool or simply hold right click and mouse over the notes you want to erase. Next, we have the mute tool. The mute tool, as the name implies, can be used to mute certain notes. If we click on the notes with the mute tool selected, it will mute them and they will no longer be audible. Now is a good time to talk about what this arrow does. This arrow triggers between pattern play mode, where only the pattern selected will play, and playlist play mode. As of now, this is deselected and the playlist is playing. If we are to select this now, what will happen is we'll only play the pattern that we have selected. In this case, it is the piano. For a more visual representation, I will open it up. And you can see that the notes that we have muted do not play. Next, we're moving on to the slice tool. This tool is more usable for audio than it is for MIDI, but it is still quite useful to have. After clicking on it, you can click on a point, drag, and release, and it will slice the given MIDI note or audio. If we have made a mistake and we want to reverse the slice, we simply press Ctrl and Z. If we want to select more than one note at once, we can Control, click, and we can drag to create a selection box. If per se we want to duplicate notes, we can simply go back to the draw tool, press Shift, hold it down, click on the notes, and drag them out to create duplicates. If we want to delete more than one note at once, we can simply press the delete key on our keyboard, not the backspace, the delete key, and that will delete the notes for us. A fun thing about FL Studio is that undoing is a different process as it is most of the time. If you press Ctrl Z, it will undo. If you press Ctrl Z again, it will undo your undoing, so to speak. If we want to undo more than one step at once and not get stuck in this infinite loop, we can press Ctrl, Alt, and Z, and this will undo more than one step. Now let me show you a simple way of writing chord progressions in FL Studio using the built-in feature of the ghost notes. First, we will open up an empty sampler track. I will explain what this is for shortly. This track by default has nothing loaded in, and so even if it is selected and we are playing keys on our keyboard, it will not make any sound. If we go into the pattern for the piano that we just created, we go up here to the piano roll, we go to the FL keys, and we click on the sampler, we can see that it will open up a new window. In this window, we can select the scale that we will be using for our song. Generally speaking, modern genres of music are generally in A minor scale. I will talk more about what exactly this means in my music theory tutorial part. However, for now, just watch. Generally, songs have to be played in a certain key. This means that they can only be played using notes from a scale. Now, this can get quite complicated because not all scales are using the same notes. If you have a scale which uses both black notes and white notes on the keyboard, it can be quite difficult to keep track of which notes you're allowed to use and which notes you're not. To fix this, it's very simple. We can go up here to the drop-down menu, click on it, browse over to Stamp, and choose the Aeolian scale, because this is the minor scale that we usually use for most electronic music. Clicking on it will do nothing, but if we click in the piano roll, it will bring up a series of notes with these intervals in them. This is the Aeolian scale. After having it, we can now place it anywhere, and if we go back to the other instrument that we selected in this pattern, namely the FL keys, we'll see that these appear as ghost notes or helper notes. They will not play because the sampler has nothing in them. They are just there to guide us and show us which notes we're allowed to use in our pattern. Let's go back to the sampler for a minute. Chances are we're not only going to use this many notes, we're probably going to use more. So I will highlight with Control, click and drag, Shift and drag to create a duplicate, and I will put this on every single octave, making sure that I place them starting on the same note every time. In this case, it is this one, C sharp. I'll repeat this until I have the entire range of the keyboard covered. This shouldn't take too long, so please bear with me. At this moment, I think this is enough for the lower range, and we will drag it up to do it for the higher range as well. This should be enough for now. If we want to put this on every measure, we can do so by doing Control A to select everything, Shift, click and drag to drag it out to the next measure. I do this for the sake of convenience, just to make sure that I can see the notes in every measure and I don't forget what I'm doing. Now we can go back to the FL keys and draw in our chords. If we look at FL keys, we'll notice, oh, the notes we've already drawn in aren't even in the key signature, meaning that in the key that we selected, these notes will sound wrong. This means we cannot use them. Now let me show you a very simple trick for coming up with chord progressions quickly. Now most beginners at this point are really stuck as to what to do with chord progressions, drawing in notes randomly, not knowing what to do. Now this is a simple chord progression trick that I like to teach to many people because it is a very efficient way to create good sounding EDM chords. This is very simple because we have already created our ghost note helpers, so this will not take long. First step is to select any note in the scale. I will select G sharp. Keep in mind that this does not work with all notes in the scale, however it does sound good on many of them. An important thing to note here with FL Studio's MIDI keys is that whenever you place a note, its length is determined by the length of the previous note, or the previously selected note as well. In this case, this note is this long, but if I want to create chords that are this long, I can select it, change its size, and then the next note that I place will have the same length as well. That is a handy feature to have, especially when you're creating things that have the same length and you do not want to be changing the length of the note over and over again. Back to the chord progression trick. Observe this. We started on G sharp. The next note, we can skip 4 notes in the scale and draw in. So that's skipping a 4. Then we can skip 3, draw a note in, and then already this is a good sounding chord. This was done by pressing on Alt and right clicking to bring up the green bar that plays all the notes at once. This is known as the 4-3 trick. It works in many cases and it can be used to create really good sounding EDM chords. If we want more low end, we can place another low key down here, which is the same note as this one, just an octave lower. So this is an E as well, because this is an E. If you listen to what this sounds like, it sounds pretty good. Now if we want to repeat the process, we can do so. However, if you want to not have to draw the notes in again and only reposition some of them, we can do that as well. We can select everything by Control-A-ing everything again. Then we can press on Shift, click, and drag out to create another duplicate of the chord. I will place this one higher, but as you notice, these notes are not in the scale anymore. Some of them at least. So we can change that by repositioning the notes which are not in the right place. And again, using the trick of 4-3, we can do this very quickly. That is an interval of 4 already. Move this one up, and therefore move this one up as well. And if we listen, that sounds pretty good. After having created that, we can further develop the chord progression using the same method. This is not a great chord progression, however it is a good start. As you can see, that was much quicker than creating it the old-fashioned way with no helpers. Now we can create this into an 8-bar chord progression by simply duplicating these using Control-A, Shift-clicking and dragging it out. And there we have an 8-bar chord progression. Right now, if we go back to the playlist, you can see that it magically updated itself. It still shows us the ghost notes that we used to help us, but they will have no influence upon the final thing. Now, if we see here, the chord progression is much longer than the actual drum loop. To fix that, we can select the paintbrush tool, select the pattern by clicking on it, and then we can paint in the missing parts. Just like that, if we unselect this pattern mode, we can hear what this sounds like. It's not a great song or a hit or anything, but it is a great start. Next, what we want to do is we want to perhaps do a little bit of mixing. We've gone over what this playlist is, we've gone over the controls, we've gone over the navigation controls. Now let's go over the mixer view. This is where the number box comes in the channel rack. See how we had all these numbers here and I told you not to worry about them? This is because they relate to the mixer, and this is what I'll be showing you how to do next. These numbers here correspond directly to the numbers in the mixer track. If you look up above them, you can see that there is a number. There's a number above each track, and the number corresponds directly to the numbers in these boxes. Let us assign the kick to channel 1, it is already assigned there. The clap to channel 2. The FL keys to channel 3. And that is about it for now. If we play, you will see that they are pulsating in the channel racks. If we right click on one of these dots to solo the track, we can hear it individually isolated from the rest. Similarly, we can do the same for other tracks. Now, let us make this sound better, because as of now, the drums are too loud, the balance is off, and it's not all that interesting. Well, here's what we can do to fix that. For starters, let us bring the volume of the kick and the snare down, because they are way too loud. That is already better. They are way too loud and they were painful to listen to. So we will take those down, and next we will proceed with further mixing. Right now, that is much better. Let us dive a little bit deeper into what mixing is. Before we do that though, I recommend that you name your channel so that you know what is what. You can name a channel by going on it, clicking on it, pressing F2 on your keyboard, and this will bring up an insert name. You can call it whatever you want. Since the first channel corresponds directly to the kick, I will name it kick. The second channel is the snare, and so I will call this snare. And the third channel is simply a piano, so I will call that piano. Now we can easily mix without having to lose what is what. We can keep track of everything very easily now. Let us add some effects to the piano, because that is the instrument that is the most important here. First, I will add what is known as a reverb. This is an effect that sounds very echoey. You can adjust all these parameters and get to learn what they do by yourself. I recommend that you do that because it develops a really good intimate relationship with the tools and you get to understand what they do. I will adjust these parameters according to what sounds good to me, and then I will show you the final result. Right now that sounds good to me. Let us make these drums more interesting. I will go to the snare and I will select a reverb as well. Though in this one I won't put too much. That is already sounding better. The kick, we can do something interesting too. Let us add what is known as an equalizer, or an EQ. In this case, it is called a parametric EQ. What this can do is it can control the different frequencies and the amount of different frequencies in your track. Now I will listen to the kick by itself and I'll show you how the parametric EQ can be used. These knobs can be clicked on and they can be dragged around to change the levels of different frequencies. For this kick, I will add a little bit less low end because it is very painful to listen to as of now. Once I found a position that I will like, I can right click on it and further change the parameters. I will make it a high pass, and I'll make it a gentle 6. That sounds good to me as of now. I will boost the highs just a little bit. Now to this, I can also add a little bit of reverb, but not too much. It is a percussion instrument, you do not want it echoing too much in this case. And if we want to further adjust our parameters, we can go on this wheel here and move it around. That sounds okay as of now. Let's listen to what it sounds like together. You can hear that the snare is a lot louder than it has to be. You can bring that down. Great, we have created a basic loop. Now let us develop this into a more refined structure. We can make this progressive by adding certain parts. In this example, I would add a hi-hat. So I will select the pattern that I want to duplicate it, and I will do the same thing, except I will add another instrument. I'll select the channels, make duplicates of them, and then we can continue with work. If you remember, in this window, there was already a hi-hat. If we want to import our own drum samples, we can go into the browser and look through all these and find ones that we like. In this case though, I will just use the default one for convenience. What I will do is I will create a new pattern. I will call it hi-hats. And I will draw it in starting after 8 measures. We can now go to the piano roll view and we can place our notes in. I'll find a note that this sounds good on. It's also important to note that this is assigned to a mixer track which already exists. This is assigned to the same one as the piano. I want it on a separate one, so I'll just drag this up and put it on a track which is not already used. The snare is not being used, which is why I'm putting it on the same track as it. Now we can go back to the pattern play here. And if we want to zoom in, because right now this is too zoomed out, we can go on control. We can scroll up and down to zoom in and out of the piano roll view. And right now, I just want it to be doing this kind of thing. I'll place this on the offbeat of every single beat. Now, I can simply exit out of it, and it is updated to have the notes in. I'll paste this in a couple more times, and now we can go back to mixing it. If you remember, we assigned it to channel 4, so we will rename channel 4 to hi-hats, as so, and then we can add more effects. I will add reverb, however I will also add another effect called delay later on. If we start it where it's supposed to play, that sounds good about now. I will also add a bit of delay. This is an interesting effect that is very commonly used. That sounds good to me. Now I will listen to it in context so I can gauge how loud it should be. As you can hear, it's starting to take shape. Now hopefully by now you're seeing how you can use FL Studio to put together a decent song. You can color code the clips here by clicking on them and pressing on F2, so you can rename them really quickly, and you can select different colors if you wish. For my percussion, I generally use red, so I'll be doing that right now. This is for the sake of organization. If you have many layers, you will have a hard time keeping track of what is where if you do not color code it. You can also rename the tracks on the side, so I'll call this clap, and you can also color them to correspond with the clips that are placed on the track. This makes organization very simple, and I highly recommend that you do this when you work on music. By now, I hope that you're starting to see how this can take shape. We can create our instruments in here, we can create new patterns, open the patterns up in the piano roll view, select our instruments, paint in notes, and then we can start to paint them in the playlist. After we're happy with your composition, we can go to the mixer, add effects, change volumes, and all that stuff. If you found this tutorial helpful, I would really appreciate feedback. This is an ongoing project, and I would really appreciate any feedback that you can give me. If you have anything you'd like to say, please say it in the comments or in a private message. For now, this is all, but stay tuned for my next part where I'll be showing you sound design and for many more tutorials in the future.